I mean, I think Rwanda sets itself apart with the level of commitment and investment into sports infrastructure and just creating enabling environment for sort of high end, let's say, global quality sports endeavors. So from the start, before we even started the championship season this year, uh, Rwanda was on the short list, right? And then it made the perfect, given the infrastructure, our partners at BK and Zaria Court, and our new friends and partners at RDB and Visit Rwanda, it made the perfect sense to be here at home for the semifinals. I think Rwanda is also showing itself as a Pan-African center. Obviously, no visa required for any of our athletes. That's super important and helpful for us. But it also shows the heart of Pan-Africanism within sort of the Rwandan ethos. And then on top of that, we have 14 nations represented in the fight on Saturday. 14 African nations. That's exceptional. That's truly a Pan-African from north to south, east to west. That's truly a Pan-African statement. And I think Kigali in particular represents that sort of Pan-African spirit with the level of sort of advanced infrastructure here that makes a fight like this a dream to host here. So that's why we're here. I think if you step back, MMA is not just 30 years old. If you think about it individually, it goes back hundreds of years to the indigenous martial arts across the world. And so over the last 30 years, we've been lucky that MMA has now, had its moment starting in the US and now expanding. And so why should Africa be excluded from that movement? It should lead the movement in our view. One, because that's where the future is. We all know the future is within Africa, particularly within the youth in Africa, and MMA is a very youth-oriented sport. And so we saw no reason, and obviously with the guidance of our chairman, Francis Ngannou, whose belief is really to create a sustainable ecosystem for MMA within the continent so that you can compete, you can win, you can support your family, you can represent your country here. You don't have to leave and go to Europe or the US. You can train there, you can compete there if you want, but let's create a system here so that people can sustain themselves and that we can create a real movement on the continent that allows this to happen. If you look at music, for example, Afrobeats coming out of West Africa, Nigeria, they didn't ask the West if it was the right time to create a movement, but then export it now. You go to any restaurant in America and you'll hear Nigerian tunes, South African music. It was the ecosystem that was first created on the continent where people listened to their own music and then it started to export. And so it's a little bit the same thing with this sport. We have a model that works. We know the fighters from the continent are exceptional. They've been fighting at the international level now for decades, could argue. And then we have a great hero who's guiding us in many regards, Francis, who really sees this as his heart and vision. So that's why we're here, and that's why this year was certainly not too early to start, maybe even a year too late, but we start as soon as we could. We raced forward. I'm really excited about the momentum we've seen already this year. This is our third fight. The fourth, it's the road to Benin. Finals Benin, December 20th. We will crown 4 champion warriors, and we'll do it again next year. So I hit on some of that before, but I think your point on the sort of sports hubs. So I think it's very important what's going on here in Rwanda and the investment made over the last 5-10 years is we need to have exceptional places to compete, right? And that does exist on the continent, but not as much as it should. And I think Rwanda's obviously leading the way. We did 2 competitions or 2 bouts in South Africa prior to this, our quarterfinals. And, they have good infrastructure down here, but it's no better than what we have in Rwanda. And so our encouragement is that more and more private sector, public sector invest to create the type of sports hubs that we have here in Rwanda, that we can see that across the continent. And that enables these types of events to occur that can then be, let's say, globally traveled, right? So globally relevant, people can come in and see it. On television, it'll look just as good, probably better than if we had the same fight in Paris or New York. And so our encouragement is to copy more of what Rwanda is doing in regards to this hub infrastructure, and that really helps ventures like ours find a sustainable path, because we know we can always come back here, and we'll go to other markets that have this level of infrastructure as well. Well, we hope to be back, of course. Listen, this is the largest MMA event to occur in East Africa. I don't think anything of this global scale has happened in East Africa. Yeah, we know for a fact it hasn't, right? And so we're excited that it's happening here. I think we want to see recurrent partners in terms of sort of city locations come back. So we'd love to make this part of the calendar if we could, right? And because we know what to expect, we know the infrastructure is here. But I do think that, the same way, part of the investment thesis, you could say, is looking at the gap in the market. So number one sport across Africa is obviously football. That's great. And then number two is a big question in some of these markets. Our friends at BAL, NBA Africa is doing a good job. I would say here in Rwanda, maybe you could say basketball is number two, but not every country. And in many countries, the number two sport is quite number two. You have to go quite some time to get to whatever that is, right? Maybe it's track and field in Ethiopia. I don't know, right? Maybe it's traditional wrestling in Senegal. So we see a really big gap in the market to create around that number two or maybe number three spot, depending on how basketball does. And that just requires the storytelling that we don't make up. We just let the fighters tell the story. You have guys like Patrick Ochemi from Nigeria, Nkosi Ndebele from South Africa. Of course, Rwanda's own James Opio coming back as his homecoming, where he trained and he did his initial fighting in Uganda, where he grew up after leaving Rwanda, but now he's coming back. So there are just amazing stories of these heroes, and we want a platform for them to tell their stories. And the more we do that, the more we have eyeballs, the more people start to be interested and to come to the fights and to watch it on television. We're in over 40 million. We reach over 40 million households on the continent through our television and free-to-air partners, whether it's Canal Plus on the pay side, or it's it's Super Sport, or it's some of our Kenyan free-to-air partners, and of course here in Rwanda as well. So we see a real movement happening, and we just really want to be consistent, tell the right stories, show up with the right quality product, never skimp on the product. Africa deserves the exact same quality that America has, that Europe has. There should be no difference, and we ensure that there is no difference. If anything, we make it better here because the infrastructure is much newer here, in particular, than it is if we were in Paris or something like that. I don't want to give way to tell you what my favorites are. I don't think that's fair. But I would say, the first fight of the night at 6 p.m. will be James Opio and Isaac, right? And so that's interesting because that is the only regional bout, if you think about it, representing East Africa, Uganda, and Rwanda. And these are countries that obviously have a long history together with each other. So it's almost like cousins in some regard. So I think it'll be interesting. But then you go to the top of the card, throughout the night, the heavyweights, you go all the way through. You're not going to see, I think you saw this in Johannesburg if you looked at the fight. That was the most eventful. And talking to my colleagues, they said, we hadn't seen an eventful fight like that in a long time. The number of knockouts, the number of just the technique, but also frankly, the dynamism of it was exceptional. So I think you'll see the same thing. And so I would hesitate to bet on any particular fighter or fight or say what my favorites are. So be there from the start, I think, is the goal. We'll also have Bruce Melody will be performing sort of as a mini intermission. Bruce Melody is a great artist, obviously well known across the continent, but particularly in Rwanda. So he'll be, kind of halfway through the show, he'll come on and do a brief performance, which will be exciting. In regards to Francis, very excited. He comes into town before the fight. He'll be on the ground meeting some of our key partners, meeting the fighters, getting them excited. So we're thrilled that he obviously is joining for this particular fight. And spoke to him not too long ago. And again, his heart is really around this sort of leadership element, right? It's the discipline, it's the resilience, it's the training every day, it's the mindset that we all need. and I think he represents, and he wants to make sure that across the continent, people are inspired by the same mindset that he was inspired by. And I think he's going to bring that here as well. There'll be some discussions, some interviews, but for me, I'm most excited about him engaging with some of the fighters and making sure that they instill some of those same values that, I myself am inspired by. Like I mentioned prior, we believe that MMA has the ability across much of Africa to become the number 2 or 3 sport, right? It's fine if our friends at BAL take 2, or maybe they take 3, it's fine. So first is we see that this can become a household, like MMA as a sport category becomes a household name. Now we believe we will lead that charge. We believe when people will think MMA in 3 years in Africa, they will think PFL, all right? And that's great. And then there's, of course, the regional leagues and franchises that are out there that bring up through, they foster a lot of the amazing talent that now enters the PFL tournament, right? So for example, in South Africa, we're very close with the EFC, it's kind of the local league there. They have great fighters that come up through that. And so we want to make sure there are many of those, many EFCs everywhere, if you will, across the continent, certainly here in Rwanda, and that they can foster, and we'll support them as much as we can. They can foster the best talent, and then we can sort of showcase and bring the best talent at a global level to these tournaments. So yeah, we really believe the ethos of MMA fits very well the heart of Africa. Again, a heart of hope, resilience, discipline, endurance, and youth. And all those things are synonymous in my mind as a non-African, but spending a lot of time here over the last 20 years with my experience in Africa, but also with my experience in MMA. So it's sort of a match made in heaven in my humble view. No challenges, only opportunities. That's how we look at it. But it's a new sport, so that just simply means sometimes the infrastructure. For example, the cage. We have a very specialized cage, made for performance, made for safety. We have to make sure that cage travels with us. And Africa is a wonderfully large continent. It's not like sending from Belgium to France. Our friends in PFL Europe are lucky that they can send across in these small borders. But us, we have to make a bigger effort. So there are challenges logistically. That said, we had the cage shipped from South Africa up to here. It arrived. It's being installed by locals and by people we have that are trained. So I think for us, it's just a learning curve because it's a new sport. It's a learning curve for us. And then it's a learning curve for our partners on the continent as we, figure out what lights work. Where do we have to bring the lights? Do we have the lights here? Should we bring some in from Kenya? Do we, need to have some come in? So there's a little bit of a learning curve on the infrastructure, but we expected that, to be honest, and we're prepared for that. So it's all part of the fun.